Hello, what's up everybody? And welcome to episode number 11 of the Lone Gunman Podcast. It's your boy Rob Clark coming at you today. And it is a hot one where I'm at, boy, let me tell you. So if you hear a humming in the background, that's my AC blowing right up my skirt. And it feels good. Today, I have a special treat for everyone. And we're going to veer off the beaten path a little bit of what we normally do. Because a lot of this podcast will focus on the how aspect. You know, as in how the assassination was carried out, how it was perpetrated, how it was covered up, and who was behind it, and who participated in it. But today we're going to take a look at the why it was done in the first place. Now, as I touched on in the last podcast, there's the Warren Commission version of why it happened, which was that Oswald was a lone nut, and he was disgruntled about life, and wasn't a very happy guy, and figured he had nothing else to live for, and he was going to take the president with him. Or, okay, we're gonna look at a little bit of a different scenario today. And the reason I'm excited is because last night I got the opportunity to speak to an honest-to-God CIA asset. Now you're probably thinking, Rob, you're full of shit. No. All right, look. I work two jobs. One job, I drive most of the day. Second job, okay, I was there last night, and we've had a customer, come in, and I've talked to the guy before, and I blew his mind one time. He started talking about something, I think it was related to maybe 9/11 or something, but I said something to him that I could see. He was like, oh damn, this guy knows what he's talking about. And ever since then, the guy has been real cool. He's made it a point to seek me out where I work whenever he comes in there. And he's dead cool. So last night, but I never actually asked him the question that I've been burning to ask this guy, right? Because he has an impressive resume, as he's told me before. He's worked in the Senate. He's been around Washington. He owned his own company. I won't specify to narrow this guy down anymore, but he owned his own company, and he operated it in Russia for 20 years or so. And while in Russia, he was approached by the CIA to, of course, keep his eyes and his ears open, report back. But they also wanted to put a guy in his office, and totally unrelated to his business, mind you. But the business that this guy was in afforded him to meet some really interesting people. And I'm talking real interesting, like Mikhail Gorbachev. You may have heard of him. Yeah, he met the guy on several occasions, had many deep conversations with him, and was also part of a side business with Mikhail Gorbachev that he had going on that I can't specify to what it was. I mean, I know, but I can't specify to what it was. And also, he's known Vladimir Putin for almost 30 years, and he still talks to him to this day. He considers him a friend. And this guy that I'm talking to last night, he comes up to me and says, so what's going on in the world that interests you today? I said, well, I asked him, I said, well, what do you make of all this Bergdahl stuff that's going on. And, he proceeded to give me his take on things, and one thing led to another, and he related some things concerning back when he was around there, concerning the Russia and Afghanistan, and some of the tactics that the Russians would use or the Afghanis would use on the Russians. I'm sorry. And he said, that this Bergdahl guy maybe saw some things that he wasn't very comfortable being a part of, like, squad members shooting innocent people, and he just kind of faded out, and he got picked up, or whatever the deal was. So I said, well, if that's the case, then why did the government even want him back? Just let him go, or let him rot, And so he's telling me, we're wanting to clear out Guantanamo Bay as it is. These people have been there for, 10, 12, 15 years, 13 years, whatever is going on. He said, we can't charge them with anything, Basically, by now they're pretty much useless, basically, and they're not really threats anymore. I would imagine not. They've probably been conditioned pretty damn good over the past 10 to 13 years there in Guantanamo Bay. But so then I looked at him, and since he was mentioning, Russia and knowing Mikhail Gorbachev and things, and I said, let me ask you a question. I said, because it seems like you know a lot of things about a lot of things. And I said, so who do you think hit Kennedy? And he looked up at me, and he kind of smiled, and he said, you know what? He said, what time do you get off? I said, about a half an hour. He said, I'll tell you what. He said, meet me down the street at such and such a bar. He said, we'll have a little talk. I said, all right, cool. Do that. I'll see you down there. So I got off work, went down. Sure enough, the guy sitting at the bar. So I rode up there, and he says, hey, I've already got us a table over here. Let's go. So we went over at the table, had a little bit more privacy, ordered some drinks. And he said, so why did you ask me about the Kennedy assassination? I said, well, honestly, it's something that I've been studying for, 25 years, and I'm really interested in it. I said, the stuff that's going on now, and of course 9/11 and all this other stuff interests me too. I said, but it all began with JFK, and it will always be about JFK. Sure, I'll look into other things, but the JFK assassination just has so much intrigue and mystery and crazy, corners and turns, and it's interesting to me, to try to figure out how they did it or who did it and all that. So he kind of smiles and he says, yeah. He said, I'm going to tell you a little secret. I said, oh yeah, what's that? He said, and he told me the story of how he was in business over there, and that the CIA was paying him to pass along information, give this guy an office in his business, and presumably they were conducting surveillance because this guy's business was, I'll just say, in communications. Okay, so, and like I said, he knew a lot of people, and they liked the guy. I mean, this guy's like 6'5". I mean, he's a big, imposing guy. He's tall. He's well built, handsome dude. He's probably in his 50s now, but he still takes care of himself. And where I live, it's probably about an hour and a half southwest of DC. And of course, all these people, when they reach a certain age or hit retirement, or they have made their money, they like to get away from the city, away from the chaos, to somewhere like where I live, but it's still close enough to where they can go there if they need to. But it's far enough away that it's far enough away. You know what I'm saying? And you know, there's everything here. It's beautiful, and you know, a lot of people just like the country. But yet, you know, it's still close enough to where if they need to get somewhere, they can, you know, within an hour or two. And so I'm talking to this guy, and he said, "You really want to know what I know?" And I said, "I don't know, do I?" And he said, "Well, I'll tell you this." He said, "I know some things." And he said, "I don't know why I'm even still alive sitting here talking to you." He said, "There must be a star by my name in a book somewhere that says, 'Leave this guy alone. He's done his service.'" He told me dead seriously. He said, "Look, today, if somebody asked me, I would still give my life for this country." He's like, "I still believe in the Constitution. I still believe in this country and the freedoms and all this." You know, he's a real patriotic guy. But yet he's aware of all the corrupt things that our government is doing, including, you know, military stuff and all that. And like I said, he used to be around Washington, you know, around Capitol Hill and things, and you know, he had heard and seen some things about several people that I won't mention because it's just gossip and nothing that really matters. But where he get most of his information from is from the Russians. Okay, so I guess take it with a grain of salt, or believe that, you know, the Russians probably did know what happened. Okay, so he's telling me he's talking to Mikhail Gorbachev one day, and the subject came up, and he said Mikhail told him he was thinking about putting who killed JFK in his book that he was writing. And my friend told him, "You might not want to do that." And then Mikhail was like, "Well, why not?" And the guy said, "Well, for one, nobody would believe you. They would think it would be Russian propaganda." He said, "And for two, if you did tell the truth and you put it in your book," he said, "your book would never see the light of day, and it wouldn't matter anyway." And Mikhail thought about it for a second. He said, "Okay." He said, "Well, do you want to know who killed Kennedy?" And my buddy was like, No, I'm good." He's like, he said, I can go without knowing." And Mikhail said, "Okay, suit yourself, my friend, you know." Well, Gorbachev leaves the room, and one of his aides comes over to my friend, and they had a good rapport because, you know, of course, you know, it's not like you're going to pick up the phone and talk to the premier all the time. So he asked the aide, he said, "What the hell is Gorbachev thinking, you know, wanting to put this in his book, you know, and all that?" And the guy's telling him, say, "Look, you know, he's going to be done with this soon. You know, put his memoirs out, and you know, he's getting older." He said, "Pretty much everybody's dead already." And so my friend was like, "Well, I didn't want to tell him that I wanted to know who killed Kennedy because, you know, I don't want him to know that I know anything." He said, "But what exactly the hell is he talking about?" So the aide pretty much knew what he was asking him, and the aide told him point blank. He said, "It was the generals." And my friend said, "What do you mean the generals?" He said, "The generals, the Joint Chiefs of Staff." He said, and he told him, you know, it was two other entities that collaborated on the hit. And he specifically mentioned LeMay. And other entities being military intelligence and rogue elements of the CIA who had used their own people and subcontracted other people. So my friend's sitting there thinking, he's like, oh man, that's deep. He's like, well, but why would the generals want Kennedy dead? And his aides looked at him and said, look, he said, they saw what Kennedy did during the Bay of Pigs. You know, Kennedy put his missiles in Turkey. So the Russians put their missiles in Cuba. He said it was just a pissing match. He said nobody was going to strike. Okay? It was all for show. He said the big problem that these generals wanted addressed. He said, and you have to remember, this was back then, this was when commies were the enemy and communism was the enemy. He said the generals wanted to hit China. And when I mean hit China, he said, I mean nuke it. And my friend said he sat there for a second. He was like, so you're telling me that our generals wanted JFK to nuke China? He said, yes. He said, because the general's argument was, if we don't do it now, they're going to be a superpower in 10 to 15 years. They're going to have nuclear capability, and them being the communists that they are, they're going to take us out. So we need to hit first. And JFK agreed to do this. Okay? To their face. He says subsequently, they wanted war, of course, in Vietnam. And JFK changed his mind and started pulling his advisors out of Vietnam. The time came and passed to hit China, and he backed out. And he said that the generals, you know, due to his soft stance on communism, his unwillingness to participate in other wars, and then of course him reaching out to Russia to be their friend. You know, who wanted to be these communists' friend? Ain't gonna happen. Plus you double cross us, not once but twice or 3 times. And he said they'd had enough, and they decided that JFK had to go. So I'm sitting here listening to this guy. I'm like, oh, okay. I'd never heard the China angle with the nukes before. You know, I heard that, you know, it's a possibility of the Joint Chiefs and all that. You know, getting mad because of the Bay of Pigs and because he was pulling out of Vietnam, and of course, you know, we want this perpetual state of war or threat of war or a boogeyman. You know, there's the communists. You know, if there's not war, then there's got to be a threat of war in order for these people to still make their money. And so I'm thinking, okay. And I said, did Putin tell you anything? And he said, as a matter of fact, he did. He said, we were playing chess one day, and I was talking to him, or the subject of Lee Harvey Oswald came up. And of course, you know, that before he was the president, he was in the intelligence services, KGB, stuff like that. So the subject of Oswald came up, and he told my friend, he said, look, he said, he was never our guy. He was always your guy. Okay? And he said, and we knew it from the minute he showed up on our doorstep. We were not fooled for 1 second by his sincere defection. He said, we let him in because if we didn't, and this guy died or slit his wrist over here and died over here, that would make us look bad. He said, so we let him stay. But we kept an eye on him the whole time he was here. He said, and we let him go because we'd had enough of him. It was time for him to go. He said, but he was always your guy. He said, he was never our guy. He said, we never tried to turn him. You know, we let him live his happy little life here and take his couple of pictures and write things in his little notebooks and whatever and go on his merry way. And he said, but don't think for a minute that we didn't have guys doing the exact same thing in America. He said, and probably more than the 20 or so defectors you sent over here. And you know, my friend was like, yeah, of course, you know, I understand. And so he's telling me that even now, things that are going on in the world that Putin's dealing with over there in the Ukraine, and is all about a natural gas pipeline that he's been supplying to Europe, and it comes through to Ukraine. Well, these other big companies have been choked off the supply, and they're taking that from them, and they're taking it over, and they're charging market and a half price for the natural gas now going to Europe. And this is killing the economy of the European nations. And I said, well, why isn't Putin doing anything about it? Why is he sitting idly by while, you know, the CIA pulls another one of their little coups over there? And he said, because Putin always had a second plan. He planned on rerouting and selling to China and India his natural gas at market and a half value. So he's actually making out better than he was, while the Americans still get what they want. I was like, wow, that's pretty deep stuff. You know, deep politics, man. So we chatted for a little while longer, and the whole time this guy's talking to me, I'm studying him. And I'm looking for little ticks, little signs. I'm looking at his eyes to see if this guy's full of shit, if he's bullshitting me. But I couldn't see any. He seemed sincere and candid. And he told me, he said, look, what we're having this conversation right now, he said, it never took place. I was never here. He said, we're never going to have another conversation like this. And I said, that's fine. You know, I said, well, I appreciate, you know, whatever you're telling me. And he just kindly asked that I not reveal, of course, his name and the business that he was in. And I said, no problem at all. I said, this is mainly just to satisfy my curiosity and, you know, possibly, you know, affect some conclusions about what actually happened. So, there you have that. I mean, I had always dreamed of running into an honest-to-God CIA agent and them spilling the beans to me. And of course, this guy wasn't, you know, an on-the-scene insider from the time, you know, of 1963. But I mean, it's the other side of the story, you see, from the Russians. At least that's what he knew about. You know, and then he proceeds to tell me about free energy, and there's, he said he's seen it with his own eyes. He said they've developed cell phones with batteries that pull energy out of the air. He said you would never have to charge a cell phone ever again. He said it would stay in a state of perpetually chargedness. I said, what are you talking about? I said, you talking about like Tesla type shit, where he's harnessing the energy from thin air? He's like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. He said, it exists, and I've seen it with my own eyes. And he said, the question is, will we ever see it commercially? I said, well, probably not. And then I said, said, what, a bunch of them guys on the plane that went missing here recently? He said, yeah. He said, awful funny, isn't it? I said, yeah. And then he said, I know it exists. He said, it's been around for a long, long time. And he said, but we don't have it. And I thought that was cool. And then he also told me, and this kind of was a little freaky, he said, they've perfected a process to where an old person, say 90 years old, can be hooked up to a machine with, say, like a 5-year-old. Okay? And the 90-year-old is basically given, simply put, a blood transfusion. Okay? But the process also somehow pulls, some stem cell resources into the bloodstream of the 90-year-old man. And over a process of, say, 6 months, they maybe do this like once a month. He said over the course of like 6 months, the 90-year-old begins an anti-aging process where they actually start to get younger. No shit, this is what he's telling me. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, so, these super rich, super elite, may be able to live forever. Like, immortality may be a reality. I'm thinking, oh shit. I said, so, it's kind of like the old thought that maybe, like drinking the blood of a virgin or a child will help you gain immortality. And he said something like that. And he said, and the 5-year-old is not hurt in the process whatsoever. It's just like a blood transfusion, basically. He said they're not harmed at all. They're paid millions of dollars for their service for the 6 months. And, these old guys get younger. He said they actually start reversing the aging process. And I was like, wow. Yeah. So I got my mind blown last night, literally. I was like, holy shit, I can't wait to podcast about this, man. But like I said, take it with a grain of salt, because who knows for sure. This is just one man's story talking to me. Who knows if he would tell me the truth, or it's all bullshit, or who knows. But I know the guy is legit, just from talking to him before. And, he's told me other things that I can't even talk about. But, it's something to think about. And he even said, which we might revisit this in a later podcast, that Malcolm Mac Wallace was used in the assassination, but it wasn't because LBJ wanted him to be there. He said it was to ensure LBJ's cooperation. Think about that. Yeah. So, there you have it, folks. Another fine episode of the Lone Gunman Podcast. Episode number 11. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I've streamlined the Spreaker page a little bit. Okay? If you go under my info, it's really easy on the app. I'm not sure about the website, but on the app, you can hit info, and it'll take you right to the email links. It'll take you right to the Facebook page. All you gotta do is click a button. It makes it real simple. But that's it for this week. Thank you all for listening, and please check out my buddy Doug's podcast over at the Dallas Action. He is awesome, and he's killing it.